Wow. Bam Rodriguez is a minus 420 with Estrada a plus 360. Is that fair to Estrada? What's good? It's Wood. We've got Juan Francisco Estrada, aka El Gallo, 44 wins and 3 losses, defending his WBC Super-Flyweight title against Jesse Bam Rodriguez, 19 wins and 0 losses. This is one hell of a matchup. And you know what? I should have probably done this preview before doing Teofimo Lopez versus Steve Claggett. Like, this is a elite versus elite, generation versus generation fight. And I'm surprised by the betting odds here. Like, I know Juan Estrada has been out of the ring since his 3rd fight with Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, which was December of 2022. But when you look at Estrada's pace, his volume, the precision of his punching, his movement, I think that this fight might be closer than some people think it's going to be. Now, Estrada, I think he might be on his way to the Hall of Fame. Like, he had been coming up the ranks and he lost an early fight to Juan Sanchez. This was like back in 2011, but then he went on another run. He contended for the light flyweight title. This is back in 2012, and that was against Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, for sure a future Hall of Famer. And Chocolatito beat Estrada in their first fight more than a decade ago. So Estrada again contended for a light flyweight title, lost via unanimous decision. Then he moves up to flyweight, fights for the WBA and WBO titles against Brian Viloria, beats Viloria via split decision. So at that time, that was by far Estrada's breakthrough performance, one of the biggest wins of his career, really. So he wins 2 flyweight titles in that fight against Viloria. He defends those belts successfully several times before moving up to super flyweight, beating Carlos Cuadras at the StubHub Center. It was still called the StubHub Center then, in Carson, California. Beat Cuadras via unanimous decision, and then he challenges Srisaket Sor Rungvisai for Sor Rungvisai's WBC super flyweight title. Sor Rungvisai won that in a very close fight, majority decision win for Sor Rungvisai. So this is the second of 3 title challenges that Estrada is turned back. Remember, Chocolatito beat him earlier, and now Sor Rungvisai denied him the super flyweight title in a close fight. Then Estrada goes on a nice run, and the 3rd fight in that run was a rematch against Sor Rungvisai for that same WBC super flyweight title. This time Estrada beats Sor Rungvisai, and this is after Sor Rungvisai demolished Chocolatito in their rematch. Because remember, Sor Rungvisai won the first fight against Chocolatito in a very close disputed decision, and then he knocked Chocolatito out in their second fight. So Sor Rungvisai's name is buzzing by this point, and Estrada is the guy to beat Sor Rungvisai and take his title. Now, the second title defense for Estrada was a rematch against Carlos Cuadras. This time, he stops Cuadras in the 11th round. After that, he runs it back with Chocolatito. 9 years later, and this fight, in the trilogy between these two, I think that this fight is the biggest classic. The second of those 3 fights. It was controversial, it was close, it was high action the whole time, back and forth, just ebbs and flows. This time, Estrada wins via split decision. A lot of people thought that Chocolatito deserved the win. And remember, this is after Chocolatito got knocked out. This is a few fights after that knockout loss to Sor Rungvisai. So Chocolatito is pretty much making a comeback. He won a WBA belt, so there were 2 belts up for grabs. There was Estrada's WBC and Chocolatito's WBA belt. Again, this one, in my opinion, is the best of the 3 fights. Again, Estrada won this one. He later vacates the belts that he just won. He's out of the ring for like a year and a half, comes back to fight RG Cortez. Now, he wins this fight against Cortez. I thought he had to actually rally back. I didn't think he looked his best. I thought he lost a lot of the first half of the fight, and I thought that it was closer than the scorecards indicated. But Estrada beats Cortez. Then he has a trilogy fight 3 months later against Chocolatito. Now, in this fight, Estrada gets off to a great start. I thought that he won like maybe each of the first 5 rounds. Like, Roman Gonzalez was slow out the gate. Like, it looked like it was gonna be a bad fight altogether for Chocolatito, but Chocolatito had a great second half of the fight. Estrada looked like he was slowing down a bit. Chocolatito battled back and made the scorecards close, but Estrada once again won, this time via majority decision on the scorecards. Another close, disputed win for Estrada. You can't call it a robbery. Some people thought that Chocolatito got robbed in the second and third fight. If one of those was a more clear win for Chocolatito, I would say that it was the second fight. Third fight, it's hard. You can make the argument for Chocolatito, but in a way, you can't call it a robbery because of how many rounds Chocolatito gave up in the first half of the fight. It's almost like a couple of Lomachenko's fights where you lose some of the early rounds like he did against Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, and then he starts climbing back into the scorecards, winning some of the later rounds. But the opponent has banked so many of the early rounds that it still ends up being super close, where at best it could go either way at the end of the fight. But yeah, Chocolatito was tenacious in the second half of the fight. He was on his front foot coming forward. He was able to trap Estrada a lot more easily. Estrada wasn't able to move as well. It became more of a phone booth style fight. So yeah, the second half of the fight was fireworks in their third fight, whereas the first half of that third fight was more puzzling. It was more like, is Chocolatito okay? Well, that was Estrada's last fight, and that was December of 2022. So again, a lot of inactivity between then and now. And you know what? I love it when these types of fights happen in the super low divisions, like basically anywhere from under 122. So we're talking bantamweight and below, 115, 112, bantamweight is 118, because sometimes we have like a firebrand, right? In one of these lower divisions, like Nonito Donaire. But in the post Donaire, Donaire continued to fight, but after Donaire, it's really tough to draw attention to these super light weight classes. Well, when you have a breakthrough fighter like Chocolatito, that kind of lifts all ships. So because Chocolatito started appearing on the Triple G undercards, started getting some like pound for pound top 3 attention, I think that Chocolatito's fame, well, relative fame, like boxing fame, he wasn't a crossover celebrity, but he was boxing famous for some time. I think that that drew more attention for other fighters in that division and around that division, like Estrada, like Sor Rungvisai, like Carlos Cuadras. So when Bam Rodriguez started to emerge, much younger than these other guys, and he got his shot against Carlos Cuadras and put on the performance that Bam Rodriguez put on, that all of a sudden just launches Bam Rodriguez's name, because again, Cuadras, Sor Rungvisai, Estrada got a boost from Chocolatito, and Bam Rodriguez did perform his butt off in that fight against Cuadras. Like, you were seeing the age gap play out in real time, where there was a moment where Bam Rodriguez dropped Cuadras, but not only did he drop Cuadras, he sidestepped Cuadras as Cuadras was looking to come forward with a combination. So Bam hits Cuadras, sidesteps Cuadras, and he sidestepped Cuadras so skillfully and so quickly that he looked like he had time to tap Cuadras on the shoulder, wave at him, and then punch him and knock him down. It looked like nearly that bad. And yes, Cuadras did do better in the later rounds of that fight, but by that point, Bam Rodriguez had dropped him. He had won just about every round. He made Cuadras look like Cuadras was walking in mud, and he wins a wide unanimous decision there. His very next fight is against another legend in those lower divisions, Sri Sakat Sor Rungvisai, the guy who flattened Chocolatito in the rematch. And I thought that this was going to be a very competitive fight. Not only was he quicker than Sor Rungvisai, more explosive than Sor Rungvisai, more of a sweet scientist than Sor Rungvisai, but as much as Cuadras looked like he was walking in mud against Bam, Sor Rungvisai looked way worse. He got beaten up, whereas Cuadras got outboxed and beaten up to a degree. Sri Sakat Sor Rungvisai got bludgeoned, got pummeled, and he got stopped in the 8th round. This was a sensational performance from Bam Rodriguez. I mean, those back-to-back fights against Cuadras and Sor Rungvisai were so good for Bam. Some people started putting him in like the lower end of the top 10 pound for pound. And you couple that with how young he is, like in his early 20s. Yeah, this had people hyped on Bam Rodriguez, and rightfully so. But then Bam Rodriguez goes back down a division to leave room for his brother, Joshua Franco, to be a champion and to conquer that division. Joshua Franco had the trilogy with Andrew Maloney, where he won, I believe, 2 out of those 3. The other was a no contest due to a head clash and a bad cut. But Bam Rodriguez goes back down a division to make way for his brother, who ends up losing the rematch against Kazuto Ioka. The first Franco-Ioka fight was, I think, a majority draw, and then Ioka won the rematch via decision. And Bam actually had one more fight before going down a division. It was against Israel Gonzalez. Wasn't a great performance for Bam. Like, it was more of a pedestrian performance. He won the fight via unanimous decision, but he didn't look as sensational as he did in the 2 fights prior. So then he goes down a division, fights Christian Gonzalez for the vacant WBO flyweight title. He breaks his jaw in that fight, has to kind of dig deep and win a unanimous decision over Christian Gonzalez. Then he has basically a showdown with the other best fighter in that division, Sonny Edwards. So the IBF and the WBO titles are up for grabs between Bam and Sonny. This is a big deal. Some people were wondering, is the sweet scientist Sonny Edwards going to be too much, and is he going to be able to outbox Bam Rodriguez? Or is Bam's speed, power, his jab, his footwork, his changing of levels, his pivoting, is it going to be too much for Sonny? Something's got to give here. Well, this ended up being a very competitive fight in the first few rounds, and I feel like there's a little bit of revisionist history in this one, because Bam stopped Sonny in the 9th round and he beat the hell out of Sonny in those last few rounds. I feel like the idea is that this was not a competitive fight. It was a competitive fight for like the first 3 to 4 into the 5th round even. Yes, Sonny Edwards did get a mouse under his eye and he received a cut over his eye, but it wasn't that apparent until like the 5th or 6th round that Bam was starting to pull away. And once he started to pull away, it just went downhill for Sonny. He ended up not moving as much as he was in the first couple of rounds, ended up kind of obliging a phone booth style fight. Some people think that it was because there was something wrong with Sonny, but I think that thing that was wrong with Sonny was Bam Rodriguez's ability to cut the ring off. So Sonny would move, but Bam has a way of kind of sidestepping and effectively tracking the mover. And as soon as he does that, he sticks his jab out there and as a southpaw throws a hard left hand to the belly area. So I think that he was slowing Sonny down with some of that work to the body. And again, with that jab that he would stick out there, and he would change the destination of his backhand, of his left hand. He would go low and then he would go high, and he would again work Sonny to the body. So he ended up breaking Sonny, dropping Sonny, and stopping him in the 9th round. This was pretty much a career best, I would say, career best performance for Bam Rodriguez. So now I'm looking at Estrada versus Bam. And again, I'm a little bit surprised that Bam is a greater than 4-1 favorite here and Estrada is a greater than 3-1 underdog. But again, I kind of get it because of the inactivity for Estrada, but also because since this is a generational fight, we've seen Bam against 2 other top fighters from that generation in that division, Quadras and Sora Rungvisai, and both of those guys look like they were just in over their heads against Bam. So I'm wondering, is Estrada, who usually looks like he's the one pushing the pace, like he's the better mover, like he's the fresher fighter. Again, he has tired in a couple of these fights, especially in his last fight against Chocolatito. But I'm wondering, is Bam gonna make Estrada look like an old fighter? I think Estrada's like 34 now. Bam is, I believe, 24. So we got 34 versus 24 in these lighter divisions. That might matter. Like, I'm having trouble seeing Estrada get out to an early lead on the scorecards in the way that he did against Chocolatito in their last fight. I think that because of the inactivity and the age, that Estrada might struggle early like he did against RG Cortez, and Bam might win 2 of the first 3 rounds, 3 of the first 4 rounds, something like that. Well, if Estrada starts falling behind on the scorecards, will he at 34 be able to close the gap on the scorecards, or is it only gonna get worse heading into the middle and then the late rounds, if it even goes that far? Now, Estrada has never been stopped in his career, and Bam does have the reputation of a power puncher, which it's a little bit interesting because he only has 12 knockouts out of his 19 fights. Now, he's fought a few good fighters early in his career. Usually it's not until people's like mid to late 20s that they start fighting the really good fighters. Bam started at like 21. I mean, he's already a 2-division champion. In one of those 2 divisions, he unified 2 titles already. But it's actually Estrada with 28 out of his 44 wins coming via knockout, who's got a higher KO percentage than Bam Rodriguez. Chocolatito, by the way, has a greater knockout percentage than both these guys. But I'm really curious, is Estrada going to be able to effectively move and outbox Bam Rodriguez early? Like, Estrada often likes to move around the perimeter and then settle in and throw combinations, get back on the horse, throw jabs, go to the body as well, get back on the movement, and then selectively get into brawls in different moments where you start just letting both hands go, throwing a lot more punches, allowing for a lot more exchanges. Estrada usually fights at a faster pace than Bam Rodriguez, and maybe some of that's because he's, you know, fought Roman Gonzalez 3 times, where he kind of obliged the Roman Gonzalez pace, because Roman Gonzalez throws a lot of punches every round, coming forward, very aggressive. So Estrada almost had to match that. You do see other Estrada fights where the pace isn't as feverish. So I don't know if Estrada is going to be able to push a pace on Bam. If he does early, then these early rounds might be interesting. But I actually think that Bam will be able to match his energy, or perhaps with the youth, even exceed his energy early. And I actually think that Bam's going to get off to a pretty good start here. Now, another thing about what Bam does that might be bad news for Estrada: Roman Gonzalez worked the body effectively against Estrada. Like, when Gonzalez was losing those early rounds in that 3rd fight, it was his body work, I believe, that got Estrada to slow down to where Chocolatito was able to have more success. Bam Rodriguez goes to the body very effectively when he remembers to, and just like when he remembers to move his head effectively, he'll do that. Sometimes he'll get into bad habits, then Robert Garcia, his famed trainer, will remind him in the corner between rounds. But I mean, this is such an important fight that I don't think that Bam Rodriguez is going to be slipping in his fundamentals. I think he's going to be throwing the jab. I think he's going to be throwing that left hand to the body. And I think that that's going to be very effective. I think it's going to slow down Estrada's movement. I think it's going to make Estrada a lot more hittable. I think it's going to make him a lot less spry in the middle to late rounds. So I actually think that Bam Rodriguez is going to have a lot of success against Estrada. Again, I don't like the inactivity, even though sometimes they say as you start aging as a fighter, it's good to preserve yourself as opposed to fighting like 3 times a year. But given how Estrada slowed down in the second half against Chocolatito, and then you take like a 1.5 years off, I'm not a huge fan of that in terms of what that will mean for Estrada's performance. So I think that Bam might show out again against one of these prior generation legends. But I do think that Estrada is going to have a very spirited effort. Anything that he's got, he's going to give it. I have nearly no doubt about that. And I think that because of that, I feel like this one, unlike the Sor Rumvasai fight, is actually going to go to the scorecards. And I'm picking Bam Rodriguez to win this one via decision and not via stoppage. It's just tough to see how much sustained success Estrada is going to have. And I'm really curious to see what the speed gap, what the pace gap might look like. Because sometimes you wonder what it's going to look like between 2 guys. And it's not until you see them in the ring together that you say, oh, wow, they're like miles apart in terms of speed, in terms of pacing, in terms of defense, in terms of power sometimes. And I'm just wondering, is Estrada gonna look like his prior generation brethren, Quadras, Sor Rumvasai? Yes, Estrada's always been a better mover than both. Quadras was a pretty good mover, but I wonder if we're gonna see the generation gap between these 2 guys. And something tells me that we will. And it's gonna be interesting because we're not used to seeing Estrada like that. I think Bam Rodriguez, because of his work to the body, because of his jab, because of his adherence to the fundamentals, plus his power and boxing IQ, and I mean, he's got a lot of guts too. Again, he fought through a broken jaw. I think Bam Rodriguez, by the end of this thing, is going to be putting a beating on Estrada, and I think that Estrada is going to try to move. I think he's going to sit down on his punches when he has to. I think he's going to be forced to fight a lot more than he wants to, and I think that that's going to result in a really rough fight for Estrada. I wouldn't be surprised by a Bam Rodriguez stoppage, but I'm actually going to take Bam Rodriguez via decision here. Unanimous decision, not a split decision. If this one even becomes a majority or split decision, that's going to be a huge credit to Estrada and his career. I'm kind of viewing this as maybe Estrada's last stand at the elite level. But yeah, I'm going Bam Rodriguez via decision. Let me know your thoughts on this one. How much of a chance are you giving Juan Francisco Estrada, El Gallo, in this fight against Bam Rodriguez? And do you have any interest in seeing Bam versus Chocolatito? I almost feel like Estrada's 34. Chocolatito is 37. And you saw how Chocolatito looked in the first half of this last fight against Estrada. He hasn't fought since. So I'm wondering if we've seen the last of Chocolatito, and I wouldn't be mad if we have. I mean, 37 is up there. He's 51-4 as a career record. So I'm not as enthused about seeing Bam versus Chocolatito as I was around the time Bam fought Quadras and Sor Rungvisai in 2021, 2022. Now we're in 2024. I'm not as enthused about this one. I'm more curious as to whether Bam will go up and whether we will get Bam versus perhaps even Nalia the Monster Inoue sometime in the future. I don't know. But yeah, let me know who you would like to see Bam Rodriguez fight going forward if he does in fact beat Estrada in this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.